So today I'd love to speak about essentially reflecting on my experience with stepping away from television and really just going deeper within, I'd say, my experience with escapism and my relationship with, I'd say, these elements that I've really had to step away from consciously. And in doing so, I've seen myself very actively bring a lot to the surface. Now, what I really found, and I spoke about this briefly in the video where I was touching on my experience with not watching television for about 6 months. And what I found is essentially it's that same sort of, I'd say, tendency. Humans, I feel, we all continuously bombard ourselves with these mechanisms of escapism. We are very, very well able to successfully step outside of reality or step outside of our immediate lens or our immediate problems that arise, from very real places. And what I feel I've been recognizing, reflecting upon a lot the last few days, really comes down to this simple means that, when you're living throughout your day, you're experiencing emotions, you're experiencing, your conditioned patterns, you're unpackaging and surfacing a lot of things, that are flowing through you, be it psychologically, be it energetically, wherever it's sort of surfacing. These emotions, these, feelings of tension, these psychological patterns that you're experiencing, as they're surfacing, as they're arising, right? They have a role that you simply really need to introduce awareness to. You need to acknowledge what these patterns are trying to tell you, why they're there. Listen to what they're trying to uncove, right? And when we find ourselves actively deviating from this process, we begin to dismiss these, I'd say, these emotions and these messengers within us. We decide, all right, well, I'm going to pick up my phone and now just slip into this world of social media, this stimulus. We decide to now introduce ourselves into a television narrative and spend a prolonged amount of time absorbed within this. What we aren't actively recognizing, within the good and the bad elements of this, is we are actively stepping away. We are pivoting our attention and our awareness from what our body and our psyche is trying to tell us. Say we're in this moment, we're unpackaging all this about really to maybe emotionally what we've been processing within the day, the week, the month. There's a lot going on beneath the surface, right? And this is where I feel it becomes so paramount to really tune into your subconscious and your unconscious mind. I genuinely feel this is something that a lot of brilliant psychologists speak of in depth. But really coming back to the central idea that when we're in the moment and we are now I'd say, emphasizing and overstimulating ourselves with the stimulus, we get to this point where whatever our emotions and our energetic state and our psychological patterning is trying to actively tell us, we are just ignoring it, simply. If we're in this moment, we're like, all right, if we just sit with this discomfort, we sit with this turmoil, this angst, this anguish, this anger, this depression, this melancholy. If we sit with this and we actually allow ourselves to go deeper within this emotion, deeper within the psychological pattern, we allow ourselves to actually channel and see the way this wants to come to the surface, so we can ultimately learn to transmute it, to actually express it, right? And then in turn, honoring these dimensions of our experience. The moment that we do not shed awareness to this, we choose, all right, I'm going to go and sit and watch TV for a while, or I'm going to pick up my phone, get lost in this pattern, or decide to introduce another sort of coping mechanism that escapes from this reality. This simple silence, this simple awareness and honoring of our own silence, right? This causes a fundamental malalignment. This really just, we're robbing ourselves of this growth. This growth that really wants to surface in this moment. This growth and this perspective that wants to come to the surface in this very second. And this is where I feel like certainly there's nothing fundamentally wrong with, I'd say, these mechanisms of escapism, particularly things like television, particularly things like going on YouTube or, finding yourself slip into a sort of pattern where you want to step away from it all, right? But it's the moment that we don't really have that awareness of what we're avoiding, to the point where we just don't even fundamentally from the first place even begin to understand this process of unpackaging these emotions and really simply what we are robbing ourselves again of. Like, this is what I really feel has been really pivotal, is to see that beneath the surface, when we're not hiding from the moment and hiding from presence and the present experience, certainly there's going to be discomfort. What we're packaging, what we're processing, this is a part of the healing process, is a deep part of shadow work as a whole, is unpackaging this discomfort, seeing where it arises from, seeing the way that society has programmed and conditioned our perspective in all these various ways. And the discomfort will come. This is inevitable. But as you begin to let this surface, you allow yourself to tune in to where this is coming from. You deconstruct, you unravel where this is all coming from and where this is all going and why it's there in the first place. You begin to see deeper truths and see deeper understandings related to this. And as you do this more and more, you get to this point where you no longer see this as a negative part of your experience. You begin to acknowledge that, I see, and you approach it with a raw and genuine curiosity. That I think is the core takeaway, is when you approach this dimension of discomfort that you are hiding or dismissing or deviating from with these dimensions of escapism with a raw and genuine curiosity, you really begin to grow and your perspective begins to evolve, where you can now see the underlying mechanism, the underlying purpose of why this discomfort that you're hiding from is there in the first place. And as you allow it to surface, you'll begin to recognize and acknowledge the importance of this surfacing in the first place. This is a catalyst. This is a mechanism that is allowing you to go through this phase of developing your perspective so you can ultimately achieve a more open-hearted and open-minded perspective of everything around you, right? Simply if you feel like there's these energetic or psychological blocks that exist with things that you're doing, the people around you, things you're experiencing, the perceptions that you're trying to decipher, I really feel that on the other side, on the other side of essentially facing these things that your mind is trying to escape from, on the other side of this is clarity, is insight, is wisdom. This is where these things all come together. You see the dark and the light, the good and the bad of these dimensions of your experience. And it becomes clear, it becomes very clear that why this is a pivotal part of your experience. And it all comes down to fundamentally not stepping away, fundamentally allowing yourself to sit with your silence, sit with your presence, and know, really again, fundamentally what these mechanisms of escapism that we are continuously just unconsciously and consciously playing into, what these are really doing, right? And as we continue to shed more awareness to this, you begin to simply see the role, in a malicious way, but also in a sort of neutral way. But these things play, and then that's when you get to fundamentally decide, where do I want to be within this, I'd say, stage of my awareness? What do I wish to introduce within my moment to moment? And how do I wish to perceive this, right? It's really what I remember fundamentally seeing. I think the last thing I want to say, something Aubrey Marcus spoke to, was that the idea is we're not supposed to fight the system. We're not supposed to resist the system. The system that's in place, the system of society that we're in. The key is to allow ourselves to develop a new system that leaves this old system obsolete.